So I've got brake pads to do today on this 2006 Mini Cooper R53. I thought I'd bring you along and show you how to change the rears on this car. If you want the fronts, drop a comment below, but let's get into the rears and talk you through how to do them. Quick generic health and safety. This is on the fronts, although the same as on the rears that we'll be working on today. We're going to crack those wheel nuts off just a tad to make it easy to get the wheel off when it's up in the air. We're going to put a jack underneath the jacking point. Do not use a scissor jack that's in the boot. That's for emergency use only. Make sure you put an axle stand under the car. You don't want it falling down on top of you while you're working on it. Then you can crack them nuts off, get the wheel off, and we can get started. So just quickly, we're going to get the bonnet open, get the brake servo cap off and just rest it on top. Now the important thing to remember is this makes our lives easier when it comes to retracting the pistons in the calipers, but we do need to remember to put this back on at the end. So rear discs and pads. Rear discs are okay. We're going to do the pads today, so I thought I'd show you how we're going to do them. These calipers on the back can be a real pain in the ass. So what we're going to do is set you up. Probably... that looks about right. Yep. So first of all, make sure the car is jacked up, supported, got an axle stand under there. I'm using a 3-ton jack, but there's an axle stand under the back as well. Now these spring clips here on these rears, sometimes they're corroded in. Now if you very gently go to prise that out and you're not getting much movement, just stop and make sure you put some penetrating oil on there before you go much further. There's 2 dust caps on the back here, so we need to get them off. Make sure the handbrake is off, so put something under the front wheels. I've got a couple of bricks under there at the moment. Some chocks or something will be fine. Be careful with these caliper carriers because they can be quite soft as well. So to get these off, I'm using a H7 on a flexible head ratchet. You can use a brake spanner. Oh. Use a brake spanner as well if you want to. There we go. So I normally loosen these off a little bit. Do the same on the bottom. The reason why I use the flexible one is because obviously you can move the handle about if you need to give yourself a bit more room. Now the rears need a rewind tool for the caliper piston to go back in. These have actually got plenty of life left back in them, but the owner wants the pads changed because they had a warning light come up on the dash. I think it's just a broken sensor personally, but I'm not going to argue with them. Plus, they bought the car with these on, and I'll show you in a minute, but basically, whoever owned this car before got a bit trigger happy with an aerosol can and just literally painted everything, so. Get a little wiggle, that's free, that's not too bad. Give them a little bit of a brush up. See if you can feed that through. Sometimes with these slider pin, they just need a little bit of a push out as well. So if you use a very small screwdriver, that's it, there you go. You can push it out there. So yeah, that one needs a bit of a clean up, but it's not bad. I've seen a lot worse, but you could do with a little bit of a clean. So what have we got? Ooh, I can hang down on there because the handbrake cable's there. As you can see, trigger happy there with the silver paint. And same with that one really. So yeah. Now I use this laser rewind tool. Right, so just quickly guys, I thought what I'd do is I'll quickly cut in and just show you how this rewind tool works on a bench, because I appreciate the angle in the video is a little bit tight. So this is a rear caliper for a pre-facelift car, and you can tell this because that uses a banjo connection on the end. The post-facelift ones don't have that, they have something completely different. If you need to order a replacement caliper anytime, just make sure you order the right one, because they're not interchangeable at all. Just quickly moving on, this is the laser rewind tool. So basically what you get is this adapter plate, and you get this, which is the rewind tool itself. Has a little keyway on the end of it. So this is number 20, which is an adapter, which means it's specifically for the rear calipers on a Mini R50, R52 and R53. Now inside the caliper there are 4 holes, which you can see on there, and if you don't know already, those 2 will go in to 2 of those 4 holes, and it will sit tight like so. But this plate is here to help you rewind the caliper. So what you do is you slide that in like so, and then that will sit in the middle of it, and then you can just undo this, and it will then start to push against the edge of the caliper like so. Now at this point there's a couple of options. You can start to do it by hand, which is normally what I would do, or you can get 24mm and you can tighten it up even more. Now what I tend to do is I just prefer to start doing it by hand, and if I need to I'll unwind this a bit more. And the reason why is these should be quite free moving, but they are really common to get stuck. So if you start to turn it, you can see this one's moving quite freely, but you can see it's starting to come away from there, so you just unwind it a bit more. This one's moving fine, and all you want to do is rewind it back as far as it will go. And while you're doing that, make sure that this boot here is curling up nicely. So if it starts to overlap or starts to come away, just stop and adjust this boot, because you can split the boot and that will be an MOT failure. But you can see on there, so that's about as far back as it goes. And then once you're at this point, if this gets stuck, which is, it can do, it's not uncommon for it to get stuck, get a 24mm spanner, put it on the handle there, just turn it to the right, and then that'll free it off. And there you go. So I'll leave a link to this in the description. I'm not affiliated with Amazon, I don't get anything for it, but it is a useful tool to have. If you use one of the universal kits, they work fine, but just be aware the handles on them are quite thin, so when you're applying pressure it can bend the handle. If it's a one-time use thing, I think they're like 20 quid, so it's not the end of the world. If you're going to do a few brake changes, especially on the R50 cars, I'd recommend you probably pick up something like this. It's a little bit more expensive, but it will last you a lot longer. So yeah, hope that helped. And this is a clockwise rewind tool. So it goes to the right. It's going back in, but the problem is where someone's painted them boots, those rubber boots silver, they're making a bit of a crunchy noise. So we'll see what we can do about that in a minute. There we go. So as you can see, it's all back in nicely, but that boot should be black and rubber, not silver. So we'll see what we can do. There's also a lead nipple cover missing there, and they painted that silver as well. I'm not going to try and loosen that off, but you can see where someone's had a good go there with the silver paint all the way down the back. So let's put you back over here for a minute. Let me get the pads out. So we're using Bosch pads. First time I think I've used them. So we'll see how we get on with them. These spring bits on the back here can be a bit tricky, but basically this middle bit here needs to slide over the piston. So let me see if I can do it on here. These are notoriously difficult.
So I'm not a massive fan of this design, but I don't know if you can see down the back there. That's how it sort of goes on. So I won't go much further than that, but yeah, I mean that one is a bit different, that design. Yeah. Anyway, let's put that back on there for a minute. I need to get some brake cleaner and a bit of grease. So all I tend to do with the pads is just put a little tiny bit of this Ceratec just on these bits here. I don't bother doing the back, just where it sort of moves around slightly, and then that can go into there like so. We'll do the same with the one on here. It'll come out. I'm just going to put that back in place gently for now, because we do need to clean up the sliders. Just keep that in there for a minute. If we can get that on, just for now, it will help hold them in place. There we go. Right. So yeah, just going to quickly get the drill, a little brass wire brush, give them a little bit of a clean up. I'll show you that quickly so you can see how we do it. So it's just a little wire brush on the end like that. You can see there. I'll just quickly show you a little bit and then we'll finish the rest off camera. So there you go. You can see all clean. So let me quickly do the rest of it. That's both of them done. So there you go. So you can see, nice and clean. Now, normally put a little bit of either the Ceratec or red rubber grease. I don't use copper grease or anything like that. I literally just put a very small amount on there just to help the sliders. And I can go back in there. I can go back in there. Now with these, just be really careful when tightening them up, because if they're not in the right place and they catch very slightly, then you could end up cross-threading them. And believe it or not, it's a lot more common than you think with these. So that one's going in. Let's line this one up. Don't tighten one of them up until you've got them both started, because it will pull the other one out. So this one's fine as well. There we go. These don't need to be uber tight. They just need to be tight enough so that they're not going to come loose. a little nip up. Little nip up. Put the dust covers back on. There we go. Make sure that's in. And that is it. That's one done. It's the same on the other side, but there's a brake pad wear sensor on the other side. So I'll get all of the pads in place like we have done here, and then I'll show you the brake pad wear parts separately so you can see how that's fed in. So yeah.
Brake pad wear sensors, really quick. If the light is on, then the car will fail an MOT, and if the light is on, the sensor has gone, which means you need to change this. You can't just change the pad and then the light will go out. You need to change the whole thing. Now, any that you buy off of Amazon or eBay, as long as they're specifically for an R50 generation car, they'll work fine. Doesn't matter on the price. It's not like ABS sensors where if you buy a cheap ABS sensor, it's probably going to cause you a world of pain still. These £4 or £5 ones will work just as well as a £30 or £40 one. So don't be tricked into paying for a genuine Mini One. Unlike the ABS sensors, you can get away with it with these. Now, if the light isn't on and you're just changing the pads because they look low, you can reuse the sensor if you can get it out. Now, this one is quite corroded in, as you can probably see. However, if you want to try and get it out, where my finger is here, there's two little metal strips on each side. You squeeze them together, apply some gentle pressure backwards, and it should slide out. Now, if it doesn't slide out, you probably need to pick up a new one, but for the price, you might as well change them when you're doing the pads anyway, unless there's a reason as to why you don't want to do it. They're not overly complicated. These parts here, they just literally slide into each other. They're rubber, and you just pull them back, and you get them to a point where that thick part goes through the hole, and then that locks it into place, and they just tie around the existing cables. So you can see on here, you just put it through. It's got lots of little ridges on it. Pull it, and then it's in. And that's basically how they go on. So this is the routing of the rear brake pad wear sensor, and this is on the driver's side rear caliper, and this obviously goes underneath the bleed nipple cover. So we put that on top, and then you can see the routing as it goes behind the suspension strap. So I then lowered the car down onto the ground, so the wheel is touching the floor, but it's not released all the way down yet because I need to tighten up the wheel bolts. I always do these with a torque wrench, and I always do these by hand. I don't gun these on. If you gun them on, you can cross thread them. Also, you can damage the locking wheel nut key, and that will just open you up to a world of pain. So take your time, make sure they're nice and tight, and then once you're happy with them and they've torqued up, just release it off the jack completely. And of course, as we said earlier, remember to put the lid back on the brake servo. Make sure it's nice and tight. And then what we're going to do then is go inside the car and pump the brake pedal a couple of times, because the first time you start using the car, that pedal will be really low to the ground. So you don't want a surprise as you're driving around. So just pump it a few times, make sure it's nice and stiff, and then take it for a test drive. If you found that video useful, please consider subscribing. The button's down below. And don't forget to check out the other videos on the channel.